At times it has seemed like the milk of human kindness that allowed us to reconcile in 1994 had gone sour. But we will not surrender to the forces of pessimism and defeatism. Our society is anchored in the roots of tolerance as well as coexistence. And we stand firm, resolute and united against all and everything that seeks to divide us or destroy our hard-won gains.
Welcome back, and we're continuing with the conversation about reconciliation. Joe, Andile was saying earlier that Parliament is not sufficiently engaging with the conversation about the expropriation of land without compensation. In your interactions in your organisation, how are you dealing with this conversation?
Well, firstly, where I disagree with Andile is it's about dialogue, and he says dialogue is over. We must engage with a specific
There is
plan.
such a thing as dialogue fatigue.
There is, but once again, not between average people. People that are just wanting to get on their lives, want to have a safe environment. Who are the average Joes? The black and the white and the Indian and coloured guys. Where are they? Who are they? They're not
Who
up
is to
there.
say who is average?
Well, the people I speak with, they don't represent anyone. They come to our meetings, have a meal, have a glass of wine or a beer or whatever,
yeah.
and we share one another's
But when you have a random conversation such as that,
it's not random. Yeah.
How can you take it forward in terms of wanting to implement the kind of things, the kind of conversations you get to have?
That's the whole thing of what are the mechanics of land? How do you get to giving land without compensation? What are the actual practical mechanics? We have to talk about that. If you can't talk about it, how do we implement it at all?
Stanley, how is your organisation interrogating the conversation of land expropriation without compensation?
Yes, of course, it's a very topical issue in South Africa. But on the land issue, as in many other issues, our approach is very simple, that we don't have a zero-sum approach. You know, this is something that, and this is where I disagree with Andile, that dialogue still has a place. I think that, you know, the majority of people would like to see more radical and urgent change. But I think the last election, you know, the will of the people indicated very clearly where their allegiances are, and so that you know, far radical, whether it's right or left approach, did not resonate with people. And I think we also need to understand that. And so when we interact with these issues, and we run a program where we bring stakeholders within the agriculture sector, in the rural districts together, whether they farmers, farm workers, people who are related or linked to the agriculture industry, together to deal with issues. And I think ultimately, you know, there has to be an understanding and some insight from particularly those who have land that it is unsustainable. There is absolutely no way that this can continue along this path. And that's why I made the point earlier. Why do we have dialogues? If it's for the sake of placating people, making people feel better, then all we're doing is we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It has to be pointed, it has to be directed, and it has to have very specific outcomes. People must see change and not just talk about change.
So, Joe, we understand Andile Mgxitama's positioning very well, the advocate for the rights of black people. What would your organization be advocating for?
Our approach is purely engagement, breaking down otherness, and to take
with
that.
What end game?
The end game is to understand where is he coming from.
Yeah.
I don't know this guy. What is his past? What is his present? Where are we going with this? Where are we going with the country? How do we engage with one another and a cultural difference? How do we do that at all?
Andile, you look frustrated by this.
I grew up on a farm. I was born and raised on a farm, white farm. My parents were farm workers. White people on those farms spoke our languages, South African languages. They were the most racist. So you can't tell me that the problem we have is misunderstanding. We don't know each other. No, we know each other very well. The problem is addressing the question of injustice. This idea now that white supremacy is called, fragility of whiteness. Huh? The problem is white supremacy, which is based on an economic system which comes from colonialism, from slavery, from apartheid. Now we are moving away from those concepts and creating false, situations of, we just misunderstanding one another.
Yeah.
After I drink, the black people go to their township and squatter camps. He stay in the white suburb where he is from. So you see, the materiality of difference remains. There's Santon, there's Alexander. Are you saying if white people from people from across this, they have some braai and they go back to their situation, you call that reconciliation? No, it's just a false moment of trying to create a situation where people seem to agree. They don't.
So Joe, in your conversations, how do you propose we deal with the effects of past systems?
Just to... like the World Cup, our conversations it's not an event, it's an ongoing thing. So it's not a going back and having a braai, feeling good about yourself.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing engagement for more than 2 years now. The challenge is, of course, how do you break it down into something practical, to get the poverty of the streets in my suburb where I stay in Melville. People don't want to get out of their arses and out of their comfort zones. They want to have big debates and talk about things and land redress, but how do we do it? What's the practical thing?
What are the practical
things?
We
must take it from there, and this is where we are. We've been going for a year where we just had talks, and every month now we have guest speakers from Nick Mhlongo to Fred Kumalo to Rudolf Landman. But now is the challenge is to go next year when we start again to, okay, how do we take this from the think tank it's becoming to something else? And that is the challenge for Parliament, for Andile. These are the ideas, but how do we do it?
Have you been surprised by how it has changed from what the intention you had when you started?
Certainly is.
Yeah, tell us about the journey.
In the beginning, it was just guys getting together, Malusi and myself and some of his friends, and just having some beers because we have no idea I have no idea where he comes from, and vice versa. And after about 3-4 months, we realized we're just going to have beers, and nothing else is going to happen.
Would you invite Andile?
I would, of course. I just said so.
Yeah.
For a drink. Are we making friendship? I think we're insulting black people. Speaker. I'm sorry, we are insulting black people, at least the people that I speak for. People who are victims of apartheid, or victims of colonialism, people in the squatter camps, people systematically excluded by a system that targeted black people. We sit here and say we must actually understand each other. We must have friendships and talk over a braai. Please, this is an insult. We want justice. And really, we just want white people to return that which they have.
Lucy to invite you.
Stanley, let's talk about the justice side, which is what your organization essentially deals with. Has the justice system delivered to the black population?
The justice system is the end product of other processes. So by the time something gets to court, processes had to be done before that. So I think when we talk about justice, we talk about inclusivity, we talk about fairness, we talk about a true democracy where everybody feels that they belong. And I think it's important to also say that, one of the things that will translate into justice, and somebody said this last week on a public platform, and I will not, it's a prominent person, but he is a white person who said that he started thinking about the fact that, he has a history of benefiting from a system that alienated the majority of people, and how is he going to be true to this concept of justice? And he made the decision that he will inherit from his parents. And if he is a true South African, understanding the South African context, ideally he should only keep 13% of what he inherited, because that's what his group represent in the population. And I think it's that kind of thinking that will shift things. When people start saying, you know, this is what the situation looked like. 87% of South Africans, you know, are landless. They have nothing to call their own, not even a piece of land that their house is on. And I like the fact that he started thinking along those lines, because that is redress. That is saying, in a way, I deserve 13% of what I will inherit. And, you know, and I think that's radical for where he comes from, but that's the kind of needed conversation that we must have.
Stanley Henkeman is the Executive Director at the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation. You're watching Unfiltered. Stay with us for a conclusion of this conversation after the break.